Hello, my name is Eric Mraz, and I am a student at Boise State University. Like each of the members of this presentation, I juggle school, work, and a social life. Currently, BSU has nearly 17,000 students enrolled in undergraduate studies, with a graduation rate of only 21%. This is according to statistics pulled from the school's website, Facts and Figures page. As part of my leadership theory and practice class, I was assigned to a 4-person group tasked with identifying a group that affects us and our peers. For our presentation, we have decided to address this low graduation rate as signs of a deeper systemic problem, a problem we feel can be corrected by making changes to how and when the information about student services is presented to the students. Services that would help students meet their graduation goals at a higher rate than the school currently has. Each one of our team represents a different demographic that has had experiences with similar outcomes of not getting the knowledge of programs and services we were entitled to. We consist of a disabled veteran, a former student athlete, faculty of the university we attend, and a non-traditional student who, as of the COVID pandemic, is now an online student. We are all afforded services like counseling, tutoring, and the ability to have our individual situations assessed by advisors, just to name a few. As students, we are not always informed about what services exist to help us overcome obstacles to success. We believe that the responsibility of getting the information on services to the students should be provided by the university through leaders using principles that we have studied in leadership theory and practice. Every person who attends university does so with the goal of achieving a degree. However, life happens, and often that is when a student goes without the help that they require. We want to be clear that we are not blaming the university for individuals not completing their degrees. However, we do feel that all undergraduate students at Boise State University, regardless of the extracurricular activities, affiliations, or background, should be provided with equal access to resources that will help them succeed. As I stated, each one of our presenters has had their own experience of finding out about services they could have used after the situation had concluded or got to a point where the knowledge was too late. Each one of those situations could have been avoided if the university had appointed leaders to identify us rather than the self-identification process that is in use today. I am now going to hand over the presentation to Jason Smith, who will discuss the situational challenges. Jason?
Hello, my name is Jason Smith. There are 3 types of situational challenges that leaders face when using adaptive leadership to solve problems. The first situational challenge is technical challenges. These challenges are problems in the workplace or community that are clearly defined. The solutions are known, and change can be implemented by the leader through procedures already in place with the organization. In this type of situational challenge, there is no need for adaptive leadership because the followers look to the leader to solve the problem, and the leader is able to solve the problem. The second situational challenge is technical and adaptive challenges. These challenges are clearly defined, but do not have distinct, straightforward solutions. Both leaders and followers share the responsibility in tackling this type of problem. The leader is the go-to person and can provide resources and support in addressing the problem, but the followers need to change, adapt in order for the problem to be resolved. Third situational challenge is adaptive challenges. These challenges are problems that are not clearly defined or easy to identify. The leader does not have the ability to solve these problems through the normal way of doing things in the organization. In these problems, a leader's role is to encourage followers to identify the problem and resolve the issue. There are 6 leader behaviors that are important in confronting challenges in adaptive leadership. I'm going to talk about 3 of these behaviors. The first behavior is get on the balcony. Our leaders need to ask themselves why the graduation rate is so low. They need to step back and look at the big picture. Are all of these students at Boise State University being provided equal access to resources that will help them succeed? Our leaders need to see that all students are being treated fairly when it comes to resources being made equitable to all students. Now that the problem has been clearly defined, the next leader behavior is to determine what type of situational challenge this is. Is it a technical problem that can be resolved with procedures already in place within the organization? Or is it an adaptive challenge? This problem is a technical and an adaptive problem. It will require both leadership and students involved in to resolve the problem. Our leaders would need to make changes so that all resources would be more equitable and inclusive to all students at the university. The role of the students would be to accept responsibility for their own learning. They would need to utilize the resources that are being made available to them and accept the extra guidance they would be receiving. Change is hard. The solution to our problem will create change. The third adaptive leader behavior is to regulate stress. Our leaders at Boise State need to help the faculty recognize the need for change within the university without becoming overwhelmed by the change itself. Making sure that all students are guided to the resources that will help them succeed with credit will create extra work for the faculty. It will also put added responsibility on the students. In regulating stress, our leaders need to create an environment where faculty can brainstorm solutions and talk about their concerns. The leaders will need to provide direction and manage the conflicts that arise with the change. They will also need to be strong and not let the pressure of those that oppose this change get to them. I will now turn the time over to David, who will discuss the adaptive work.
Thank you, Jason. So for me, I will be discussing the adaptive work, but before I do get into that, I think it is very important to kind of put some of what we've already talked about into perspective. I am a student that has had the opportunity to work for the Arbiter here at Boise State. And due to that ability, I have been able to gain a little bit more insight. And through friends and through some of the research that I've been able to do, a particular example that I think that really speaks to the issues that students and the university have is what I'm going to present to you before I discuss the improvements that can be made. A friend of mine who was in a class had a professor who was very, shall we say, put offish. And to be clear, that doesn't represent the entire faculty and administration at Boise State, but it does create additional challenges for the student, especially if the student themselves don't really understand who they are as a person. Eventually, what ended up happening was the student had to drop out of college because they did not feel that the professor tried to work with them in any way, shape, or form. And through that, they found out after the fact of the abundant of resources that Boise State has. What I find amazing about this, though, is how finding these resources can be presented in a unique challenge, in that it's not something that you can simply just go on Boise State's website and search. And then on top of that, you look at the idea of how once you find it, it becomes almost impossible to find a way that into that door where somebody who is qualified, who has gone through the process, can actually help the student. A lot of these resources that are available are for people that kind of majored in the field and don't necessarily have the hands-on experience. Now you might ask, how does this apply to adaptive work? Well, the couple areas that I'm going to talk about is the process to which work is directed, holding the environment, as well as the followers within that process. I think it's also important to remember that leaders must be adaptable given the situation that they create or inherit. By that, what it means is if a student is going to reach out, then the person that's going to direct them needs to have this sense of uniqueness as to the situation, because not every single person is going to experience the exact same situation the same way. I think it's also important to understand that this comes back to the process that is implemented by the university. If the university offers the resources, why isn't there a process throughout the school year, at least in the first half, that explodes these abilities that are out there for the students to engage? I've personally heard time and time again from professors, it is up to the student to seek the resources that they need. But how does the student know what resources they need if you have 10, 15 things that a student can access just because they're failing? There's nothing there. There's nothing in that environment there that directs the student in the proper formulation to figure out what they need to improve on. This comes down to holding the environment. Boise State at this point, to me, feels like they're in this little bit of a status or quid pro quo or status quo, in that the faculty has taken great steps to reach out to the students and better the students' learning environment, but there's definitely a disconnection between the two, in that they still don't understand, and the student doesn't understand, where these resources are extremely available for the student to access. This leads me to my last point about followers. Leaders are designed to allow followers to do the work that is available that the leader presents to them. So by this, if the resources are available and they've been articulated properly by the leader, by the university in this case, it allows the student to be able to step up, find the issues that they are having, and then accurately come back and make the university proud. I'll conclude by adding one more quick little story. I'm due to graduate in May. Fingers crossed. And the last thing that I want to do is disappoint this university. There isn't anything available per se that I know readily that I can access that will allow me, once I graduate, to be able to help other students that are coming in. That are basically 18-year-olds that really have no idea what they are wanting to do with their lives. And that is a shame. That is something that we need to fix, because we are all Broncos at the end of the day, and that's what we have to strive to achieve. The better leadership that we have in position, that go through the adaptive work, that go through the leadership process, the better the university will be overall. I'm going to swing it over now to Christina so she can wrap up everything that we've talked about. Thank you.
So my name is Christina, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the core issues that we have seen, at least when we did our brainstorm meeting. We kind of decided that there were three main issues. and we used kind of all of our experience to decide what these issues were. The first is the resources themselves, just identifying what resources are available to our students. Each department and college on campus, they run their operations a bit differently. And so some students have a staff advisor that is a dedicated support person that they can go to. Other students have a general advising office where there are many people that they can drop in and chat with, but they're usually seeing a different person every time. And then even more, there are other departments who some students are assigned to a faculty member to work on their degree plan, so to speak. So given this variation across all of our colleges and departments, it can make it really difficult to be able to grasp the amount of training that would be needed to make this type of change. Our second core issue is how do we ensure that resources are shared equitably among students? One of the first conversations that we as a group had was talking about the specialized support that athletes get. So they have a scholarship and they have a job at the university to perform well as an athlete. And so they have specialized advisors that come in and they work with them, they look at their grades, they monitor their progress through their courses, and they identify resources that could potentially help them if they are struggling. However, this is not the case for all students. So how do we make sure that our resources are reaching all students and not just a certain set of students? Our last core issue is, are the resources inclusive? As David kind of shared in his story, we learned about a student who felt pretty othered by a professor and wound up leaving the university without ever knowing that there were things that could have helped him. And so making sure that we are inclusive with all of our students and bringing them to the resources is really important. So some of the solutions that we discussed were training for all student-centered roles, and student-centered meaning anybody who works with students, making sure that they have access and knowledge of the resources that are available to students and the best practices for early intervention is really crucial. The second solution is to create working groups in every college to identify issues and solutions. This one is something that is really near and dear to my heart, just because as a student and an employee of the university, I know that every college and every department has their own way of doing things. And I really think that it's important to use the tools in adaptive work to push it back to the people who are doing the job to help them, to empower them to find solutions that best fit their needs. And then the last solution would be an online repository that is accessible to all faculty, staff, and students. One spot with every resource based on topic. So I know that this is possible because the university just released a similar repository for all COVID-19 resources. And I think it's definitely something that would be really important because not everybody knows what tutoring is available in their major or even who to contact if they're experiencing financial difficulties or they need access to a food bank. Sometimes students don't even know that those things exist. Lastly, I wanted to talk a little bit about how adaptive leadership can help us achieve our vision. So our vision is for Boise State leadership to mobilize the campus community and empower them to provide resources equitably so we can see each and every student earn their diploma, regardless of their affiliations and extracurricular activities. Part of the crucial part of this vision is at the end of the day, everybody who works for the university and every student who attends the university, they want to graduate. They want to leave our institution with a degree. And getting them there is the most important part. So I think it really goes back to a lot of the leader behaviors that Jason talked about, just making sure that those behaviors are really connecting or helping our leadership connect with faculty and help them to prepare to move towards a more inclusive way of ensuring our student success. And for our last slide, I wanted to present our works cited, which we used some facts and figures from Boise State University, and we also used our textbook, Leadership Theory and Practice. And now I'm going to turn it back to our group to close out. I just want to thank everyone for listening to our presentation and for letting us do such a cool project. It's definitely near and dear to my heart, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you.